Hey and welcome. We're going to have a quick look today at the Unreal Engine editor, just for people who are new to it or just getting started, just to have a bit of an overview of how this editor is set up, what all the different panels do, and generally how you're going to be navigating this bit of software. So I haven't done much to get to where I am. I've literally just launched the Epic launcher. I've gone into the Unreal Engine section. We then go to library, we launch the version of the engine that we want, and then from there you can create a project, and I've created it from a template, which is the third person template. I made my project blueprint only, and I've included starter content. Now, that will end up getting you to exactly where I'm at now. If you're looking to do C++ as well, it doesn't matter. You can change your project to have C++ later down the line. So this is the same kind of editor that you're going to get regardless. So let's start from the top left then, shall we, like we read, I guess. So place actors is the first window you'll come across at the top left. This is how you're going to be adding things into your level. So I say the word level and maps is quite interchangeable. You'll notice when you come into your project for the first time, it would have made a folder for you. And in this third person BP, the folder was called based on the project that I started with a template from. You can see that I have a maps folder, and it's created a map for me based on the name of my project, which is third person example. So they've called this map third person example map, and this is where you basically set up a bunch of actors, as we call them in Unreal, which is the name of the kind of objects that we place in our world that has a physical kind of location and representation in your game. You don't have to be able to see them, but they need to exist in a level. So your kind of level is the thing that houses everything. And then you're kind of attaching all these things to it in an abstract way, at least. So we're in our level at the moment. It started with all these walls and that because it was an example one, but I could, if I wanted to, in this world outliner, if I really wanted to, I could go ahead and just delete everything and we'd be left with absolutely nothing in this level. It's pitch black because there's no light source even. So let's undo that so we got this back. But just to show you, all of this is stuff that has been set up in our example map. So yeah, we use this left panel, place actors, so that we can add stuff to our level. So if I wanted to add a cube, for example, I can just drag it in and you can see it now exists in our world. I can then reposition it, and we'll talk about how to move things around in a moment. Now, generally speaking, you're not going to be doing too much of like adding shapes in. You might be doing it when you're prototyping or trying some things out. But quite often what we'll be doing is we'll be making classes, or we'll be making our own custom actors and placing those into the level. For example, I might want a fireball that moves across the level, and if it hits anything, it explodes. I might make a fireball actor, and then I could search for it here, and then it would show it to me, and I could drag it into the world that way as well. So this allows you to add things that you've made custom as well. But we're just in an empty project at the moment, so we don't really have anything to show here. Now, next up, what we're going to look at then is this viewport. So the viewport is how we see what's in the level visually, in the three-dimensional space at least. You are able to change things. If you want to view it from a different perspective, you can have a look in these kind of wireframe views if you want. So this changes the kind of perspective that you're looking from. And then you can change how you want to see the objects, whether you want to see a wireframe like we're doing this, or you can go ahead and look at it in a lit or an unlit format as well. It's just when you're looking from the top and the bottom, it automatically changes to a wireframe view, just so it's a little bit easier for you to see things. So let's change this back, and you can see the geometry of how everything has been put together here. Okay, so that's how we use these tools at the top left. It just lets you change your viewport. You are able, if you wanted to, you can set some layouts where you can see multiple at once. So you could see the 3D view and one of these top-down views. It can be useful if you're setting out maybe a bunch of platforms and you want them to be aligned nicely. But yeah, that's something you can do. But realistically, let's just start with this one main one. As I alluded to, this changes how things are displayed. We don't need to worry too much about those for now. And there's some extra things that you can turn on and off. Again, we don't really need to worry about those for now. You'll use those as you need them. So don't worry about understanding every option that's available to you. Okay, next up, moving over here, these are our options about how we can move things and how we move around. So how I move around in this viewport at the moment is I'm right-clicking. That allows me to kind of move around like it's a first-person game. And then I can use WSAD to move around, again, like it's a first-person game. So that's the way that I move around. You can do things like middle-click, and that'll move you up and down. So You kind of just move around on the up and down, left and right kind of axes. But yeah, most of the time when I'm moving around, I'm just right clicking and using WSAD. Now, these options in particular are for moving actors in the world. So this cube that I placed earlier, you can see it's kind of in the floor at the moment. So if I want, I can just drag on these gizmos, which show us the kind of axes of the world. We can drag this up, and then that makes it go higher, and you can use the various different axes to move it around. You can click in these middle sections if you want to move it on both the X and Y at the same time. In Unreal, the red is X, the Y is green, and the Z is this blue one. So Z is up, which might be different to what you're used to, but something to be aware of. And there's a nice little handy tool you can do. You can, while you're moving things around, we might want to put this on the floor. Instead of trying to perfectly move it down to the right spot, you can press the End key on your keyboard. And if it's got a kind of a collision mesh, then it will and that is the root component of your actor, then it will hit itself on the floor. So yeah, this is how you move. You then have a rotate button. You can do the same sort of thing. You have the axes denoted by the colors, and then we have a scale as well, which we can use to kind of stretch it out on different axes. If you want to do all of them at once, you just click in this middle, and then you can drag, and it'll do it in each axis at the same amount. You can use Control-Z in that to undo. So yeah, it's pretty easy to rectify things. So play around, make mistakes, and then you can just undo it as well. Okay, after that, we have something called the kind of world space or local space. So if we go back to this movement, so this is, we're giving it a position relative to the entire world. But what local space is if you ever have actors which are attached to one another, you can say how far, where is this position relative to its parent, or what is this rotation relative to its parent. So that allows you to change your position and your rotation in local space rather than in world space. Again, that's something you'll need at certain points, but until you need it, you don't need to worry too much about it. Just generally keep it on this world one. Then what we've got is different options for how we kind of snap around when we're moving things. So at the moment, when I'm moving this, it is snapping, but it doesn't really, it's not that obvious. Now, if I was to change this value up to 100, what you'll see when I move it is now you can see that it's moving in distinct intervals of 100 units. So 1 unit in Unreal is 1 centimeter. So 100, that means it's moving a meter at a time at the moment. So that makes it easy if you're putting down a bunch of platforms and you know that maybe your platform is a 500 by 500 platform. You can then change your snapping settings to be 500, and then you know that they're all going to be nicely aligned if you're just moving them around in that way. So let's change that back to something reasonable, back to 50, and that can impact things like the rotation too. So at the moment, if we go into rotation, you can use shortcut keys, the W for moving around, E for rotation, and R for scaling. If you hover over, you can see the tooltip says those as well. So if you forget, you just hover over to find it. But if we go to rotation, we can change this so that it rotates on different angle kind of intervals as well. So if we wanted to go on 90-degree angles only, now it will only snap to the 90-degree angles. Because it's a square, we don't actually see anything. So let's do 45 instead, and you'll see it now only snaps on those 45-degree angles as I drag around on that axis. So yeah, that's how you do it for the rotation. And then you can do the same thing here for scaling if you only want to scale at certain ratios. Now, on top of that, we do have like this camera speed. And that is if you're moving around with WSAD, as I said, you can change this and it changes the speed that you move around. If I move it right down, you can see that I'm moving super slow now. And then you can move it really high. You can imagine what it's going to look like. What you can also do while moving is you can use the mouse wheel. So I'm scrolling up and it's made me go really fast. And if I scroll down, it slows me down as well. So you can, while moving around, while holding right click now to move around, I can use the mouse wheel to kind of speed it up and slow it down without having to go into this option. Okay, so this is your viewport. That's pretty much all you need to know about that. And this viewport, if you remember, just shows you what your level is looking like. If you want to play your level, you're going to be using one of the buttons on this top bar here. And this one here, play in editor, is what you want to do. So we call this a play in editor session, sometimes referred to as a PIE for the acronym of PIE. And this is going to create this world that you've set up. It's going to simulate a game pretty much, and spawn in everything that's in this level for you as if it was a game. So if I go ahead and press play, You can see I'm now no longer are we looking at it in a view where we are moving things around. I'm actually in a game world now. And if I had any actors like a fireball that was meant to move, it would be running its code and executing it at this time. So we're now currently in a simulated version of the game, and I can move around using my controls. Because this is an example project, it's already been set up with some basic controls and a camera and all that jazz. So that's why I can use WSAD and space to jump around and the likes. So something to get used to then is you can kind of jump out of the game whilst it's running. But if you're coming from an engine like Unity, it's not quite exactly the same, as you're able to see a true representation of the world in this world outliner whilst you're mid-game. So, but it still can be handy. So let me just show you how you can do that. So say you're playing in a game and you want to have a look, around the level, but not control the character. There's two things you can do. You can press semicolon, and that puts you in a debug camera, which allows you to look around. This is the healthy way to do it. You can just have a look around, press it again, and you return back to your normal controller. But what you can do is also eject. Now, at the moment, the mouse control has gone to the game. You can see that you can't see my cursor. So if you want to get out of that so you can see the cursor, what you want to do is press Shift and F1, and it gives you your cursor back, and that will allow us to press any of these buttons on the top. So now that I press Shift and F1, I can go and press eject. And what that is going to do is take me out of the character, and I can move around. The game is still running. You can see the play button is still a stop. So that means the game is still running. And if I press possess, I'll be back where the character was. Now, if you accidentally do what I did a moment ago, if you press the F1 to F4 keys, if you don't do Shift F1, you just press F1, you might go into this. It changes it to a wireframe mode. So these are just shortcuts. You can just cycle through F2, F3 until you get back to the one you want to do. F3 is the default one that you'll be looking at. But you can also press Escape in order to exit the session. You can see the stop button has changed to a play. So that kills that kind of play and editor session that we had. Those F keys I was talking about are just kind of cycling through some of these as well. Now, what is worth talking about now then is this world outliner, because we visually can see what's in the world, but as your level grows, you may not want to go around and fly around to the bit you want to find and click on it manually, especially when you have a bunch of things layered up on top of each other. It might become a bit difficult, and that's where this world outliner comes into play. So this is essentially a list, a kind of a structured list of everything that's in your level. And like we talked about earlier, I think I said that the level or the map is kind of like the owner of everything. All the actors that you're adding in, the floor, any fireballs or any characters that you're adding in, they're all going to be kind of attached or owned by this level. And that is kind of reflected by, you'll see the most outer layer of your level is just a single item by the name of your level. And then everything that you put in it will be within that level. Now, because this was an example level, they've created some nice kind of folders. But essentially, you don't have to have folders. It's just a way of organizing things. So if you want to make your own folder, you can just right click, create a folder, and then you can drag it to kind of organize it around. But I think it goes alphabetically anyway. Once you, you can see that all of these have been alphabetic. You can't quite move them around, so it's in a different order. So you kind of have to stick with the order that it's got, which is why folders can be a little bit useful sometimes. But essentially what we've got is a list of everything that's in our level. So say I wanted to look for that cube actor that I added earlier. Now I can see it there. When I click on it, you can see that it's highlighted it over here. It's still got my rotation kind of widget on, so I'm just going to change that to the normal transform one, so it takes less visual distraction on the screen. And you can see I can click on the different things and it highlights them. Now, if I ever click on something and I don't know where it is, what I can also do is just press F, and that will kind of put my focus on that. So I press the Q, press F, and it takes me over there as well. So that can be useful if you're ever trying to find where this actor is that you've just clicked on. You can do things like search for it as well. So I can type in cube, and that'll show me only the two things that have the word cube in it. Other than clicking on different things, what you're going to be doing here is generally, you can order things by putting them into folders to keep it tidy, and you can find things that you've already added to the world. Now, what's the purpose of finding things other than moving things around? Well, to configure them. And that's where this details panel comes in handy. Now, this details panel has a ton of things, and it's all context specific based on what you've clicked on. Now, I personally like to split these two out because there's a lot of information in here, and the more objects you have in your world, you're going to have a long list in here too. So you can drag these kind of tabs around if you want, and it looks a bit weird to begin with, but you get used to how it works. If I want it to go side by side, I just drag my mouse over to the side of this kind of square rectangle that we got here. If I let go, it then creates two separate sections for it instead. So now if I want to see both side by side, there we go. I've got that vertical space to work with. Up to you how you prefer to do it. So now that I've clicked on the cube, you can see that it gives me the name of the cube, and then it gives me everything that there is to know about it. So how are your kind of objects in the world? I've referred to them by the word actor before. How the actors work is you basically have one actor, and then attached to that will be several different components. So for this cube actor, an actor, all it is something that has what they refer to as a transform, which is just a way to represent a location and a rotation in the world. So the cube on its own is nothing. It only looks like a cube because this actor also has what we call a component, and it has a particular type of component called a static mesh component. And this allows us to add a static mesh. It's a fancy word if you've not heard of it before. It's basically a way of saying like a 3D model, right? A mesh is a way of describing like a three-dimensional model. So it's a way to associate a model with this particular actor that we've put in. So if I click on that, I can then see all of the setup information for that static mesh. So if I want, I could get rid of this static mesh. And then my actor has no physical representation. It still exists. I haven't deleted it, but I've just changed the static mesh component on it to not have any model to show us. So if I undo that, we'll bring it back so we can see it. That shows you that this actor on its own, a lot of the logic, a lot of what we see or a lot of what it does may not be in the actor itself, but it's based on what components you add onto it. If I wanted to make this the fireball that I was talking about earlier, a projectile that runs across, that gets kind of fired across the room. You can put code or logic in your actor to say, I always want to move this actor forward. But what you might do is you might add a component onto it, like a moving object component. And that component's job will just be to move that the actor that it's attached to across the screen in a direction. So we kind of house a lot of our logic into components. The way to think about it is an actor is going to be, when you want to make instances of something and add them into your world, instance just means like, what's the best way to describe an instance? An instance is just like one of a type of thing that you want to add. So this cube that we added, there's rules about what a cube is, right? It's always going to be the same. And every time we add one in, it makes an instance of it. So if you think of it like a factory, there's a blueprint that specifies this is how you build a cube. We can produce as many of those as we want if we follow the rules to do that. So each one of these cubes is an instance of the cube object. Just to be clear when I use the word instance there, sorry. But yeah, what we have generally in this view then, I was saying that actors are going to be, you want an actor when you want a particular instance of something in the world that will have a three-dimensional location, and it'll need to kind of just exist in your world. Now components are something that you'd attach to an actor that does a certain bit of logic, but you might want to reuse it somewhere else. So for example, that moving fireball kind of thing that I was just talking about, or moving object. So I could put a moving object component onto this, and it would just then move it across the room. Now what I could do then is I could add a cone. And a cone is a different actor. It's very similar. It's just an actor that has a static mesh component, and it happens to be a cone this time, right? But the cube and the cone are different. But I could also add that moving object component to this, and that would also move the cone around. So what we're seeing there is the same functionality of moving the actor that it's attached to. We'd want to see it on both of them. So we can reuse that functionality across different actors. But if we went the opposite way and we went, okay, instead of putting the code to move this block across the room into a component, we're just going to code it directly into the actor. That'd be fine. I would still have my cube that moved across the room. But then if I wanted to go ahead and make the cone move across the room as well, I'd need to go into the cone code and write up how to do that as well. And I'd be kind of duplicating the same effort. So that's the way to kind of think about actors. Actors are they're an individual purpose thing, an actor that you want to exist in your game, whereas a component is kind of more like a behavior that you'll want various things to maybe possess. Even if only one of them, your things in your game, has it, there's a chance that further down the line you might want another actor to do the same thing, and so you can just add that component onto it to give it that functionality. So yeah, I know it's a bit of a wishy-washy, may have been confusing at times, apologies for that, but hopefully that's given you an idea of the difference between an actor and a component. It's something I struggle with for a long time, is whether I should make something an actor or a component, and a lot of it just comes from experience. The more you do it, the more you get used to what suits best. But okay, so we were looking at the world outliner, and we were looking back at how we can click on different things and it'll give us information about it in this details panel. We can see that the name of it is up here, the name of the actor there, and it'll list any of the components underneath it. You can then look at the details of the specific components in this section. So let's go to this cube that we're looking at earlier. And what we can see, the actor that we're moving around, when we move it around, you can see that this location, this transform that I've mentioned a few times, is updating as I move it around. So this is just a log of all of the instance specific details of this cube. And what I mean by instance specific is I could add another cube in, right? And when I move this, it's just telling me the details of this particular cube, not this cube. This cube has its own set of those values. It's its own instance of that cube. So yeah, you can see that the transform is getting updated as we move it. You can go ahead and just set these values yourself. If you want to set it to -700, for example, there we go. I moved it without having to use this viewport. So you can change the rotations and the scales and the likes. You can use these little lock icons here. It can be quite useful. What that means is as you change one of them, it'll change all of them. So if I don't have it locked and I put 2 in, it'll just scale upwards. But if I put the lock on and I type 2 into here, it would scale it 2 on all of the axes at once. So yeah, that's something that I do tend to use. So I thought I'd point that out. And then, yeah, we got more details then of the actor. So one thing that can be a bit confusing to begin with is you can see when I click on the actor, I get to see the static mesh option. So I can change it like I did earlier where I got rid of it. Or if I click on the actual static mesh component, I also see that. So the short answer here is when you click on the actor, you will get to see pretty much all of the information about all of the components that are on it. But if you want to see a specific one only, it kind of filters it out for you in a way. That's a bit of a simplified answer for it, but that's the way to think about it. So you can edit it on the actor, and that is going to be the exact same. If I change this to, is that a bigger cube? Oh no, I think it's the same cube. Have I got, there you go, a sphere. If I change it to a sphere, then I click on static mesh component, you can see this is a sphere too. They're pointing at the same thing. It's just a way of displaying the information for you. Okay, so this is how you would go and you change a bunch of stuff. And all of these values that we're seeing in here, these are all properties that either belong to the actor class. You can see if I hover over cube, you can see the parent class of it is actor. That is our kind of base, one of the base classes that you'll find in Unreal. Right on the lowest level, there's something called a U object, but they won't kind of have they're not like physical objects that you're going to be adding into your world that will be running around in that. They can hold data, they can do logic, but actor is the base class for things that you want to kind of exist in your world and have a location and a rotation and the likes. So yeah, this is from an actor class. So in the code, well, we won't go into it now, but there will be a C++ file called actor.h and actor.cpp, and in there you'll be able to find some of these values that we're finding in here. These are just properties that they've defined when Epic wrote the code for it, that what are the things that you want to be able to change about an actor? So one of them, for example, we've got stuff about replication. This can be if you're doing a multiplayer game, like how do we want it to behave? We've got a tick box here for visible, so you can turn it off so it isn't visible. So these are all kind of properties that are on this base actor class. So any actor I add, you're going to get a bunch of these options in here that you may not know exactly what they do, but don't worry about them. It's not a big issue. It's one of those things where it's okay that there's a bunch of boxes that you don't know what it does. Generally, when you need to use one, you'll find that you will need to use one, and you'll end up learning about it at that point. There's some things you'll notice in here that I think this is related to having a static mesh. So the static mesh, I could just add an empty actor to show you actually. So let's go up into here, basic, empty actor. We'll drag this in, and you can see if I click off of this, it has what looks like a sphere mesh, but it isn't. This is just a little 2D icon billboard graphic. Billboard means it always faces the camera. That's why it looks like it's 3D at the moment. But that actually doesn't exist in the world. It's not a 3D object or anything. If I move this in front of that character here and I press start, for example, let's drag this across so I can see my start button. You can see I don't actually see anything there, but it does exist there. So an empty actor doesn't have a static mesh. It's not going to have any physical representation. Every actor needs to have something called a root component. So you will see something in here, and that's just going to be something called a scene component. And that is very simple. If we look at what's on this altogether, it just has a location rotation and then a couple of things about it in here that you can add. Now, here we can see a lot of the same stuff that we saw when we were looking at the cube earlier, right? We've got a transform in that, but there's that bit about replication I mentioned to you. And we can see this stuff about rendering hidden in game. So that was there earlier, we may have seen. So let's go back and click over on our cube, which is now a sphere. And we'll see some of these same options down here. So where was it? Rendering. We've got an option in here. And we have our replication topic that I pointed out to you. Now, what is important, I guess, is just learning to search these for what you want to find. And that's what this search details is really useful for. If you end up having a massive list of things that you struggle to look through and comprehend, you can just search. So if I want to look for something that's visible, I can just type in visible. There we go. There's all of the options to do with visibility. So that is going to be a way that you find things when you're trying to get used to where things live. You don't always have to be able to scroll through these big old overwhelming lists of properties to set on and off. Okay, so we've just been going through this world outliner, how it allows you to click on things. You can then see the details, and you can see how this actor has been constructed. Okay, just going to take a drink and we'll carry on now. Okay, so what else have we got in this editor that we haven't looked at yet? Now, at the bottom, yours will probably look a little bit different. Let me just untick this box. This is probably what yours will look like when you come in. So this is basically a file explorer, similar to the Windows Explorer that you'll have in when you're using your operating system. I really like using this button. It just gives you this little folder structure view. It makes it a little bit more relatable and similar to what you're used to probably, and it makes it easier to understand where you are in the folder structure. You do have this kind of breadcrumb trail as well, which is useful. You can click on it to go backwards, but this is showing you what your project is made up of. So your project will have, essentially, if you go into the files, you'll be able to find the project. Let me show you quickly now. So if I go into my dev folder and we go, let me just find the project that we've just started. I think I've got it in my learning, and then there we go, third person testing. Now inside of here, you will have a few folders. If I had code, you'd see one called source as well. So you will have more folders in here if you've done yours as a C++ project. But what's important here is I want to point you to this folder, the content folder. That's what you see when you're in editor. So you don't see your code files as much. You don't see anything that's in these extra folders. This content is really what you're navigating here. So content is where all your assets are going to live. And assets is the word for basically saying like a not a code file, but something you want to use in the game. So that could be a texture, that could be a 3D model, that could be a sound file that you want to use, that could be a map even, like these levels that we're in at the moment. If I go into my maps folder, this is an asset. It's of type map, but it's an asset. And to prove that, if I wanted to go and see that, we can go into this, we can go into the same folder structure that I've gone, maps, and there we go. We can see that it's a file. It's got a special file extension called a UMap, but ultimately they're all kind of treated as assets. Most of them you'll find in here will be .u assets. Maps are a slight exception, but they're kind of treated in a very similar way. So anything you kind of make in Unreal or you import to Unreal, it will create an asset out of it. So yeah, it's a little bit confusing to begin with, but just to give a bit of context to this then. So if I just find a quick picture that I can chuck in, let me find one from my pictures folder. Okay, this will do for now. So if I wanted to add this image into my project, so what happens is I might want to go ahead and make a folder. At the moment, I don't particularly like the structure that they've got here, but that is beyond the scope of today, I guess. But if I want to make a new folder in here, so let's make a new folder, and I'm just going to call this textures. Or you might call it sprites or whatever. It depends what kind of way you're working with this. So in this folder, I'm going to drag this file. Now, what's interesting? So it looks like it's there, right? But what we've got is it's brought in as a texture. It knows from the file type that I dragged in to turn it into a texture. And you can see next to my cursor, it says source file, the bottom option in that list, source file, and then it points at the actual file location. So this, you haven't copied it. What it's done is made a U asset out of that image. So if I was to go into this folder and we go into third person and I've got a textures folder, there you go. You can see barred gold U asset. It's not just an image that I can view. This is a U asset, basically means this is something that Unreal knows how to work with and how to interpret. So anything that you make within Unreal or import to Unreal, it will make a U asset to kind of represent it within the editor. So it is very likely that you will have two different kind of assets for just one picture. You have the source, which is this, and then you have the actual asset itself, which is this. So this is important for kind of version management, I guess. If you're uploading your content somewhere, you want to make sure that the images and that you're using, you probably want to put those in a folder that is also tracked by your version management, so that when you upload, say I added this character into the game, when I upload it to my version management software, that the asset will go up, it will have the texture in, it doesn't need you to upload the picture separately, but what it means is that you won't have uploaded the source image to it. So if you ever need to change it or do something about the import process again, that file won't have been uploaded. So you'll have it locally on your machine, but if you're working with other people, they won't have access to the source file. Again, it will still work, but I generally think it's a good practice to make sure that the actual source for your models and for your textures and your sounds, that you put those under version management as well into a different folder. You wouldn't want to put them in content. To be honest, you can. Some people would put them both in the same folder. So they would have the PNG and the U asset all in this same folder. That's one way you can do it. Another way that I've seen people do it is outside of the content folder. They make a new folder called like their source assets, and they'll just drop everything into that. I think it's probably easier just to put them into the same folder. So within your content, within my folder where I created the texture, that I'd actually just put that file in the same place. It makes it easy for you to track and like kind of pair them together, I guess. But yeah, I just thought I'd explain that because that was something that wasn't super obvious to me when I first got started with it. So yeah, this is the kind of the content browser then. As I was saying, you'll be able to see U assets. You'll notice that let's move that file into the same location. Sorry about this. We've got to just find that same folder again. I shouldn't be too long now. We'll just go into my dev folder again, into learning. and then into my folder. There we go, great. So we're going to content and we're going to textures. Okay, so there's that, right? If I want to go ahead and put the picture in that I was just working with, or any picture for that matter, let me just choose another picture. So I've got another one with a different character. So let me just copy this. I'm doing Control-C and I'll do Control-V to copy that in. So you can see the PNG is actually in there now. So if we add it to the content folder, what you'll see what happens is when I go into Unreal, it goes, "Ooh, we noticed that you've put something in here. Do you want to import it?" You can press import. And then what we've got is, this exists. And you'll notice the source file, it doesn't have a long path this time because it's in the same folder as it. You can see we've got tank gold there. That's the PNG. And then we've got tank gold U as it. And you'll notice that this view doesn't show you the actual file of it. So it doesn't show everything. This isn't just a mirror of your content, of your Solution Explorer, your Windows Explorer thing. You know, you can do filters that will allow you to see different things, but these are more Unreal filters to show different types of assets, like textures or maybe particle systems that you want to see. So yeah, that's something to be aware of as well. You won't see exactly everything that's in that folder, but if you ever want to check, you can just go to the folder itself and you can see the actual files that are in there yourself. Okay, so other than that, things to be aware of. You may not have this little collections window that I've got at the bottom. That's something I think you can set in one of these settings. Is it in here? Yeah, dock collections. So I can get rid of that and you don't see it. But collections, you can tick this box and it'll switch to show you that. So it's kind of like a toggle between them. And collections is just like a shortcut. It's a way for you to make like a favorites if you want. You can add a bunch of assets to a collection. So you might have like all character stuff in a collection. And then instead of having to find the right folder for everything all the time when you're trying to find stuff, you can just go to the collection and click on it and it'll show you everything in that collection. So it's a way for you to make like a custom organization of your assets, which don't follow the actual folder structure of your project. So it can be useful sometimes. I sometimes dock it, but you may have noticed, as I said, there's a few things that we can do in here as well. If you don't want to see it in this tile view, you can always change it to like columns. You can make it a little bit, I guess, easier to fit more things on the page. You can also, if we are in that tile view, you can use control and mouse wheel, or you can zoom in and out as well. So if you've got a bigger resolution screen and it's hard to see, or you just want to fit more of them in, you can just zoom out as well. That's something to consider. But other than that, if you ever lose your content browser as well, in Window, this is where you'll find. You go to General Content Browser and you can add more of them or reopen it if you've closed it. So you're thinking, why is there up to 4 you can have? And the reason is sometimes you might want to just have one separate one on a different window if you're working on multiple screens. So you have, you know, all of your assets on one screen and then your editor in one. It means you can get rid of this one and give yourself a bit more space to work with, perhaps. And you know, it's one thing they've done in Unreal 5 is they've made this automatically kind of hide when you're not using it to give you more kind of visual space to work with. Another thing you might want to do is you might want 2 of them. So I can drag it, like I showed you earlier, you can rearrange windows. So if I put this on the right side of this rectangle, I now have 2 of them. So if I wanted, I can make this one look at a certain bunch of files, and this look at a separate different group of files. You can turn on this file view for it as well, like I showed you earlier, the folder view, sorry. So I could set this one for my textures, and maybe I always want to keep that there, but then I also want to go around and do other things at the same time. It gives you a way to manage your files and stop you having to navigate the folders so often as well. Okay, so that gives us a general quick overview of the editor as it is, but realistically, we want to probably know a few more things about, I guess, the normal things that you're going to be doing in the editor. And really, I guess, one thing we should learn about is something called the level blueprint. So the level blueprint is a way for you to kind of code some visual logic, so not C++. Now we're just what they call blueprint scripting, where you drag a bunch of nodes and connect them together to do various things. So the level blueprint is where you can set some logic that is tied to this level. Do you remember I said everything in this world is kind of a child of this level? So this level can have some code that runs on it too, just like every other actor can have some code on it too. So let's have a little look at this. So if we go into blueprints up here, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll bring these back to how they were earlier, just so we can fit a bit more on the screen. So it may look similar to how you've got it as well. So if we go into our blueprints and we click on the down arrow and we go into open level blueprint, this is where it's just an empty screen at the moment. You can see it's opened in a new window. I can just drag that up to here. And this is an empty canvas for us to do some logic if we want. So really, you're able to make anything happen that you'd want to. So let me just start with some simple logic. So every kind of actor in the world will have something called a begin play event. So the begin play event is when this actor is created, in this case when the level is created, do the following code. And you'll have things as well. You can have an end play event. So I'm just typing in the names of them. I only know them because I've done Unreal before. This stuff is just going to take a while for you to get used to. The more you play around, the more you look at existing code, you'll get used to the kind of structure and these names that I'm using. So end play, that'll happen when I finish the game. So, because it's a level, it'll happen when I leave this, when this level's destroyed. But let's say it was a fireball flying across the screen. When I spawn the fireball, begin play will get called. When it hits a character, explodes and destroys itself, it'll call end play. And then there's another common one as well, which is our tick. So if you're used to Unity, for example, they have start, I think, and they have an update method. Tick is the same thing. It gets called on every actor, every single game frame. So if you think of the game running as there's one big coordinator that will go, right, every single actor in my world, what do you want to do? And it'll call the tick of a function on every single actor for it to do some logic. So if I'm a projectile moving across the screen, it'll say, okay, keep moving in the way you're going a little bit. You know, if it's a health bar, it might say, right, okay, move yourself to reflect the current character's health if they've just lost health. So everything will have some logic that it does in its tick, perhaps. And the big coordinator goes through all of these actors and says, right, do your thing. And then that's, once it's finished going through all the actors, that's one tick done. And then it'll do it again. And generally you'd want at least kind of 30 of those in a second. And that's what will give you 30 frames per second in a game, that it's processing 30 mini steps of logic every second. So yeah, that's how the tick works. It's something that will be called every game frame. So these events allow us to drag off of them and tell something to happen. We're not going to do any crazy code today. This is just getting you used to the editor, but you can drag off. There's something that you can do called print string, which will just print something on the screen. So let me just say begin play has happened. I'm going to press this compile button. Compile, think of it as it's going to check, as everything you've done, is it correct? And it'll just try and make sure that you haven't made any mistakes. Saving it, there's a little star here that indicates I haven't saved it, so I'll press save as well. And then what we'll see now is if I press play, we'll see by here it says begin play has happened. It disappears then. Great. So that means this is actually hitting. This bit of code, when the level begins, it will call this bit of code. And if I want, I can make it do something else straight afterwards. So let's go stop. I'll do another print string. And I'll say, hello, darkness, my old friend. Okay, now what this is going to do is going to do this, and then it's going to do this. And you'll notice that when we press play, it kind of does them both at the same time. But the order, you can see begin play was first, then hello, darkness was above it. So it'll do one, and then new messages will go above it. It kind of pushes it down. So it did go in the order of this one, and then this one. It doesn't wait for this to finish as such. It'll just go through and do it. If you're wondering why it disappears after 2 seconds, there's some option in here. You can change how long it displays for. Okay, so if we want then, we can do the same thing for ending. So I just copy and paste with Control-C and Control-V. I can just say the end play. And we're probably not going to see this one. Let's press start and go. So I press play. Now, how do I destroy my level? Now, maybe if I was changing level, it would destroy the old one. But if I stop my game, then I'm not going to be able to see much. But you can just see it does show up on the screen for just a moment. Now, if things like that you want to see and you don't want it to just be on screen, you may have noticed that these have a thing called print to log as well. I don't think this is disabled, but this is enabled by default. So you may need to go to your window and you'll look for something called the log. I'm wondering, is it in debug? I haven't had to open it for a while. Developer tools. There you go. So we've got message log. So message log, this is the wrong one, sorry. Message log will tell you if there's any errors or anything. If you're not connected to source control, or if you are and there's an error, it'll give you information that something about it, you know? So this is more to do with the editor. Is there any problems with this? What we're actually looking for, I'll just dock this down to here for now. This is another one in here, sorry, called the output log. Now this will show every little message that any actor or any code in your game is trying to spew out at this moment in time. And so if we were to look in here, we would be able to find the same messages. You see, let me just search in here. So we can search the log for begin play. And you can see by here, begin play has happened. So this is this message, log blueprint is from the third person example map. And then it goes ahead and it says the message. So you can find stuff in that log as well if you are printing or logging to that log as well. So in the same vein, we'd be able to check for our end play there. So there we go, end play has happened. Right, okay, let's go back into this level blueprint. So the idea is that you can build up logic in here. And with this tick, remember I said it happens every frame. If I wanted to just demonstrate that quickly, we could go ahead and I could just compile it. And now what we're going to see is it's going to spam hello darkness my old friend, because that is happening, you know, 30, 60, whatever times a second. So that is just spamming. You see the scroll bar is just, there's so many times that it's actually printed out, and it's going to continue to print out until we press stop or until this actor is destroyed. So this level blueprint is where you can set up logic that you want to happen in your game. But really, if you think about it, you kind of want each actor to be responsible for their own logic. You don't want to have to say, right, my map is going to say that my actor should move over here, and my map is then going to make a fireball move across the screen. It'd be a lot better if the fireball just took care of itself and said, right, which way am I facing? I'm going to move in the way that I'm facing. And if your actor was just saying, right, I'm going to, like the playable character now, I'm just going to wait here and listen for keyboard inputs, and when I get them, I'm going to move. And so things tend to look after themselves. So the level blueprint isn't going to be where you script everything, but this is a place where you can do some quick testing, and sometimes there's good reasons to use the level blueprint to do some code as well. What's really handy about it is that you can get reference to things in the world and make them do something. So if I wanted, I could select this sphere that I made earlier. I know it's called cube, which is a little confusing. So let's rename that. I just clicked on it twice slowly there to rename it. So I now have sphere. So I've clicked on my sphere. Then I go into my level blueprint. And if I right click, you can see the first option we get is create reference to sphere. Excellent. Okay. So what this means now is I can point to that specific instance of the sphere. Remember we talked about instances earlier of I could make multiple ones of these. So we need to know which particular one we want to talk to and tell it to do things, right? So we have this sphere that we selected earlier, and I could make it do things. Now we're only going to get a select options of what a sphere actor can do. So you're not going to have something like, you know, explode in here, because the sphere hasn't been told how should it explode. So you can write your own actor, which is a grenade, and you could write your own explode function, and then you could call it from here if you wanted to, for example. But we're just going to do something that actually exists in here. So you can destroy actors. Any actor in the game you can just call destroy on. So there we go. We will destroy that sphere. And to make it a bit more visual, I'm just going to add something called a delay node, which is something that will wait that long before it carries on in the flow of logic. So let's say, right, wait for 2 seconds, and then we want it to destroy. All right, compile, save. Let's see. So I'm going to press play. I got a turn. There's my sphere. And after 2 seconds, it got destroyed. If you missed that, let's do it one more time. There we go. It got destroyed. So you can do some logic in here referring to the actors in your world. But the main reason I want to show this to you is just to give you a bit of an idea of how this begin play, end play, and the tick work, and generally how you add these nodes. So any node that I can add, I can write, like you notice I just right clicked in this graph and wrote print earlier. These are what we call kind of like globally accessible functions that you can call from anywhere. That's something that they've coded into the engine to make it easier to use Blueprint. You have these a bunch of helper functions essentially. But Otherwise, what you typically need is something to call functions on. So that's why I've got a sphere here. I can, through dragging off of it, this will give me access to the list of functions that the sphere knows how to do. That's what context sensitive up here means, is when you type in things, it will only show things that the sphere knows how to do. If you don't have anything to drag off like this, then it's going to be looking for functions of the type of object that you're in, and we're in a level at the moment. So it'll only be able to find like level-based functions that are defined in what makes a level a level. So yeah, this is a blueprint for you anyway. I've not gone through everything on the UI here because I just want to give a bit of an overview of the editor rather than coding and that. But hopefully that's given you a little bit of an insight into that. The final thing we'll have a look at then, I guess, is if we just want to make a little a custom actor. So let's go ahead. At the moment, we can only drag in things that we've made, but I'm going to go ahead and make my own one, just so you can see the kind of quick flow of how we do that. So I'm going into my folder called Blueprints, and we're going to go ahead and make our own blueprint class. So a blueprint class, just basically, like I said earlier, it's almost like a template. Like, remember I said the cube, this is as if it's a production factory. There's rules on how to make a cube, and then you can just drag a bunch of them, and they'll follow those rules to create it and all look the same and behave the same, right? So when we make a blueprint class, we're basically making like a template that we can use to create multiple things. So that would work in the same way. So that's why we've got this third person character. We could drag in a bunch of these, and look, we've got a bunch of characters in the level now. So it's a set of rules that will describe how to make this particular actor that you're trying to make. So we can go ahead and make our own one. We can go in and we say, right, okay, I want to make a new blueprint class. And then you say, okay, what do you want this this new actor that you're going to make? What should it be? Like, how should it behave? If you don't want it to have any behavior other than it's just an actor, you click on this top one. But if you want it to inherit, so inheritance is a coding concept where you basically, if you think of it like a hierarchy, if your parent, if my parent was a bird and knew how to fly, if I inherited from that bird, then I could fly too. But then also I could do extra things maybe. So if, for example, we wanted to make a new actor in here, and we wanted it to be something that could be possessed, meaning like the player can take control of it, we would maybe derive from the pawn class, which is a special type of actor which is made for being possessed by players so that they can be moved around and controlled. We're not going to go through all of this. This is something you'd learn about if you looked up the Unreal game framework. But just showing this is what this screen is asking us anyway, is what do we want our class to be? What should its base functionality be? We're going to go with a simple actor. We're going to give it a name. The kind of typical way that we name things is we call it BP underscore, and then whatever we want to call it. So this will just be like my test actor for now. Sorry for the unimaginative name. And if I drag one of these in at the moment, you can see it's one of those things where it's got no real representation. I can look, there's nothing there. Okay, so what do we want this actor to do? Well, I can click on it and you can see, right, it's just an empty actor. It's got some actor-based settings in here and it's got a location. I can move it around. That's all I can do. So let's have a look how we can change that. Now, what you can do is you can like add components in here. So say I want it to be, I want to say, hey, I want a static mesh on this. That's the thing where you can add in a 3D model to it, right? So I can add that, and then let's go ahead and put in a sphere. And alas, look, I have a sphere on it. Great, so I now have an actor which has a sphere, kind of similar to what we had earlier, but don't worry about it. I press play. Wow, I can see it this time. Great. Now, the trouble is, if I drag another one of these out, this is empty again. Why is that? So the reason is when we're in this side view, the world outliner and the details, we're editing an instance, okay, an instance of a BP test actor. So it will be told how to be made from this file. Anything we change once it's in the world will not be reflected on all other versions of it. So if we want all of the ones to be changed, instead of adding it here, I'll delete that. The best way to go ahead and do it is we go into our blueprint, and in here we can go ahead and set it up. I mean, I can drag this into a different window if we want, so we can see kind of what we've got. And in here, it's kind of similar to the world outliner, but it's kind of just laid out a little bit different. You've got all your details like we had down here. You've got your details, and then you've got your add component view that we had up here. So it's just spread out a little bit differently. But if I wanted to go and add a component now, let's make a static mesh. Excellent. And my static mesh, I'm going to add the sphere mesh to it like we did last time. Now, can you see it's changed the one in the level for me, right? Because it is going to get its rules of how to exist from this blueprint. So I can now close that down. And that means every time I add one of these now, they will look the same. And what's really handy about this then is similar to a prefab concept if you've used Unity, is you can basically, if I want to go ahead and change what it looks like, you've got a few tabs around here. It can be a little bit confusing first time you come in. So I'll go through this in a moment, but just bear with me. So if we want to go and we want to change that static mesh now, so I'm going to click on the static mesh. I'm going to go down to the bit where we choose what the mesh is. So we're going to choose to be a cube. Every one of those have changed to be a cube. So what that means is if you're adding a bunch of these actors to your world and then you go, right, we're going to do an improvement on all of my street lamps in my world, you don't need to go and click on every single street lamp and go and change it. You can just change the blueprint of it and all of them in the world will have those changes reflected on them. So yeah, it's a great way of being able to update things that you've added to your game as time goes on. Now, something to be aware of that isn't super obvious. Let me save and compile this. So let's say on this particular one, right, I want this one to be a sphere. It's an independent test actor and it doesn't want to be like the rest of them. So we're going to click on it. We're going to change this to be a sphere. You see only that one changed because we're changing the instance, remember, with this. Now what's interesting, right, is if I now go, let's save my level, get rid of, so I get the little stars at the top bother me when I don't save, so apologies for that. If I wanted to go ahead and change what these look like, so for example, have we got any materials in here? Okay, so I've changed the material, they all still change. Even though this one is a sphere instead, it changes, right? That is great. However, if I go ahead and change the shape of it, let me go to a cone, only 2 of them change. And why is that? So the reason is this. We have changed the static mesh on an instance, and once you change it, you're telling it that, okay, I want to override, I want to do different to what my kind of blueprint tells me to do. And that means if you ever change the blueprint, it's not going to go and override your manual changes in the level. So you can kind of benefit from the group changes of blueprints, but then you can also change certain ones and not worry about them having to be updated anytime you change that base blueprint again. So that can be indicated by, or that is indicated, I should say, by a little yellow arrow you're going to see here. So you can see by here, next I've got a little arrow here, a magnifying glass, and then nothing on that. And what that is saying is this is doing what my blueprint tells me to do. Now if I click on this one, and we go into the static mesh of it, you can see it's got the little arrow here. That is telling you that, hey, you have changed it from what the parent blueprint says it should be doing. And that's not a problem. But something to be aware of is if that has happened, you are not going to inherit your changes that you make to your base blueprint class. If you ever want to undo that though, you can easily do that. We can just press that yellow arrow to reset it to defaults. Alas, it's gone back to that normal form. And now, because it's not different from its parent, if we change any of these, it will now change all of them at the same time again. So that was something that was a little bit quirky to begin with to get your head around. But yeah, it's a good example of seeing how you can actually take advantage of these group edits, but also individually control and customize things. So, okay, let's have a look at this blueprint. I said I would come back to it, so I want to go ahead and do that. So this blueprint kind of view that you're in. So you get this anytime you go and have a look at a blueprint class. And you'll have, the main thing before we look anywhere is these 3 tabs. Construction script, you probably don't worry about this for now. When you need to know it, you'll know it. But mainly we have a viewport and event graph. Viewport is, what does this thing look like? So if I've got this static mesh in here, I maybe want to make this static mesh higher up on the floor, from the floor, for example. I might want to scale it on the y-axis. Right, so I've changed how that looks, and I get to preview what it looks like. And of course, because these are blueprints, they're gonna and they're instances of it, and we haven't changed those default settings, it's gonna just propagate those changes to any instances of it. Now, that's what we see. And now this event graph is, what does it do? This is very similar, you might notice, to that view we had earlier. If we go into blueprints, level blueprint, can you see the event begin play I showed you earlier? The end play, the tick. With actors, they're automatically there waiting for you to use them. They won't do anything, you see there's nothing connected to them, but this is where you would do your logic. So I tell you what, let's go into this blueprint and let's get rid of some of those print statements, because they might make this next bit a little bit messy. You don't have to delete them, you can just disconnect them. I'm holding down Alt and clicking, and because they're not connected, they won't do it anymore. So for example, if I press play, we don't see the spam of messages. Great. So we're going to go into my test actor and we're going to say, right, on begin play, we're just going to do printing again. We're not focusing on any logic today. We're just going to say hello. Great. Save that. Now, what do we expect to happen here when I press play? Are we going to see hello? How many times are we going to see hello? So the answer is 3 times. And that's because each one of these instances that we've got, I'm just pressing semicolon so I can move around. Each one of these is running the code that I've just set up in here. So when it starts, each individual one is going to go ahead and do this logic. So this is where we can code how we want it to behave. If it was a moving object, we might want to drag off of this and say, right, okay, move in this direction. You can, for example, you can do set actor location is a simple thing that you can do. You can say, right, when the game starts, I want to set the actor location to, we'll do this quickly. I don't want to explain everything I'm doing, but I want to I can get my actor location. So wherever I am now, I want to go ahead and get that. And then what I want to do is I want to set my new location to be the exact same, but we're going to add one more, like a little bit of direction to it, let's say. So let me do this again. Sorry, I didn't need to break that up. So get actor location. We're going to do this. We can do something called vector addition. So we add it to another vector, and this vector, I'm going to manually just say, right, we want it to go in the z-axis upwards. So I want it to be wherever you were, and we're going to add it with a vector of 1 in the up direction. So that should basically, wherever it was, it'll just go up a tiny bit. So what we're going to say is on tick, we want you to set the new location of the actor to be that same position as it was, +1. All right, great. Let's have a look what happens. So we go into this. I really hate that they're so chunky now. We're just going to change this back to 1 because they look silly. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and save. And now if I press play, if we look, we can see that they're rising up into the sky. That code is running every frame, and each one of them is doing that code because they are all made from the same blueprint class. They're just different instances of it, but they will do whatever you set it to do in this. So that's what the event graph is. That's when you do your logic. The viewport is where you can see what it's going to look like. But you'll notice you have the similar sides either way. If you do accidentally close these as well, just go ahead and have a look into your Windows tabs to reopen it. Sometimes if you close the details as well, you can click on these buttons to show them back open again. So yeah, it is easy to close things down accidentally when you're getting started. But yeah, so this was the actor or the blueprint view. What we've got on the right side is very similar to what we had earlier when we're clicking on individual actors and we get the details. So I'm not going to go back through that. It works in pretty much the exact same way. The only thing that's going to be different is this My Blueprint section. And this is where you can go ahead and see things that you would deal with logically. So you can see that we've got these events, a begin play, actor overlap, and tick. These are the ones that we've actually implemented here. If I delete that from there, it hides from there. These are only added because it does it by default for you on an actor. But if I wanted to do the end play one, for example, I can type in end play if you know what it's called. But what you can do as well is you can say, right, well, if I go, no, you don't want to do new graph. I'm trying to think, yeah, with the functions, I think the easiest way is probably actually just to do this, to type in end play apologies. So if we add this event, you can see that it adds it to this list for us. And then this is where we can do our end play logic. So that's what this section is. You can go ahead and make sub functions. And so functions are a way, instead of just doing it all on this one page, you can make separate different tabs to kind of segment your code away into different more manageable sections. Macros work in a similar way. I'm not going to go into those now. And then what you have is variables that you can add. And this is where it will show you components as well. So because we added a static mesh earlier, that means that we can access it in our graph. So if I wanted to go ahead and set the static mesh to a different static mesh on tick, so I can go ahead and drag this off. So we want to get the static mesh, and in here we might have a set, is there a set mesh or something like that? Set static mesh. So we put that here. I'll tell you what, let's do this in, you can hold control and you can move them into different places. Let's do this in begin play. We only want this to happen once. So we're going to change this to be so that it changes to be the cone. Okay, so what we'll see now is that static mesh that is a part of this structure of the object. When we press play, we'll have a look at them now before. They are capsules. When we press play, can you see they've now changed to be cones? So you can reference the kind of making of your object, and it'll automatically show you the components that you've got access to down in this section. But you can add normal ones as well. For example, if I just wanted to add a Boolean called am I in space yet, since these things are flying up in the sky. And what you're able to do, this is a Boolean by default. You can change types over here on that particular variable. You can then access that in the code. So you can basically, if you wanted this moving up, you can just do a check afterwards and say, right, okay, this Boolean, let's get the value of it. And then I'm going to do something called a branch, which is basically an if you're familiar with any coding. And I can basically say, right, if am I in space yet is false or true, then maybe I'd want to print a message, or maybe I'd stop myself from moving up. So I might like tell myself to stop ticking, or I might change my color, or I might play a congratulations, you won the game. So you can access variables and create variables this way, and then you can use them to kind of guide your logic. You might have a number, for example, so I can make a new one. I might make this an integer. I can give this a name of like move up count, and every time that I go up, I might want to increase that value. So you can do a set a value on that, or you can do an increment int, and it allows you then to basically increase that value by 1 every time you go up. And if I wanted, I could go ahead and print that value then, just so we can see the numbers going up. So let's go ahead and do that just for the sake of it. So we will do a print here. And we're just going to go ahead and drag that in. It'll automatically put this in, which converts from an integer to the type, the string that we need here. But okay, so if we do this now, what we should see is it'll just print 3 times because there's 3 of them. We can see how many times it's actually gone up, and that helps you see how many frames are going per second. Excellent. Okay, cool. So that should give you an idea of what this side of the screen is. It allows you to access events that belong to this class, because we are deriving from that actor class. Remember when we made this, it said, what do you want it to be? That is why our parent class is an actor. That is why we have some of these things already existing, like the begin, play, and tick, because that is something that's defined within the actor. And then we have access to any components that are on our actor down here that we can do logic on, and then we can make our own variables as well. Now, if you were to, as you get more advanced and you start learning how to do this stuff a bit more, and you make your own classes from scratch, from code, you can then make a blueprint class that derives from those. So instead of doing blueprint class and choosing from here, you can go ahead and you can type whatever, like Dan's test class. Now, if I'd made one called that, it would let me create a blueprint class from it. And then when I opened that, I would be able to see any of the kind of components that I've added to it in code if I'd exposed them out to blueprint, which is something you can learn about another time. Any of these events, if I had exposed any events out to blueprint, I would be able to type out the name of the event, like Dan's special event, and it would show up and I could click on it. And then, yeah, also any variables that I've exposed out I'd be able to see those too. So you can kind of build your logic in code and then you can access it in Blueprint as well, which is something that's quite powerful because it allows you to do both coding and this blueprint coding, this visual kind of coding that we've been doing today. So yeah, I think we're probably wrapped up with a quick overview of this editor, along with some of the windows that you're going to be seeing. Hopefully it's been helpful for you. If it has, let me know. I appreciate it. Thanks for watching. I've been Dan. You've been great. Farewell.